Hi, this is Randall Schwartz, host of Floss Weekly. This week, Jonathan Bennett joins me. We're going to be talking about Stacki, the perfect way to deploy your bare metal with getting your operating systems on it that you want. You're not going to want to miss this, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Floss Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Floss Weekly with Randall Schwartz and Jonathan Bennett. Episode 431, recorded April 25th, 2017. Stacki. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Cloudflare, the operating system for the edge of the internet. More than 6 million websites, apps, APIs, and SaaS companies use Cloudflare services to load fast, stay secure, and weather whatever the internet throws at them. For a free online chat session with a Cloudflare support engineer, visit cloudflare.com/twit. And by GoCD, an on-premise open-source continuous delivery server by ThoughtWorks. GoCD gives you complete control of and visibility into your deployments across multiple teams. Since GoCD is open source, you can download it and use it for free. To discover the power of their pipelines, visit gocd.io/twit. It's time for Floss Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randall Schwartz, Merlin at Stonehenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the little projects, projects you may be using every day and not aware of it, projects you might want to download right after this show and play with them. Today might be one of those. Joining me again, Jonathan Bennett. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, Randall. It's good to be here, as always.
It's been so long. You didn't write. You didn't call. I mean, those 6 days went by, and I was just missing you. It was horrible.
I know. I'm so sorry. I won't let it happen again.
Yeah, for those that didn't watch or listen to last week's show, we taped 1 day later than we normally do. So it's really only been 6 days since the last time that Jonathan and I got together on this virtual network here. And I'm speaking to you from my home in Beaverton, Oregon, once again, just like last week. I think, yeah, just like last week. Now I'm not remembering. Jonathan, you're speaking to us from the same place?
Yes, I'm here in Lawton, Oklahoma, the corporate headquarters, the home office.
And if you didn't have evidence for it, you wouldn't be able to tell that we even actually moved. I have a different shirt on, but that's about it. I think you have a different shirt on too, right?
I think I'm wearing a different suit. Yes.
Okay. Well, that's convenient. Hey, so the show's not about us. The show is about our wonderful guests that we get to bring on all the time. This week being no exception. This week we're going to bring on scroll. We're going to bring on Bill Sanders, who's going to be talking to us about Stacki. Stacki is, how do they describe themselves? They're basically bare metal provisioning with lots and lots of really cool features. It's actually a fork way back when we actually interviewed the guys from Rocks on Floss Weekly number 30 back in June of 2008. So I think this might be the record for the sort of related project or re-interview, however you want to look at it, since this is a fork, because it's 9 years, which is almost the entire duration of the show so far. So I'm very happy to be bringing Bill Sanders on in a minute. Jonathan, what do you know about Stacki so far?
So not a whole lot about Stacki. I know provisioning, especially when you've got a bunch of machines, can be a pain. So for a lot of things, you can just do, you pop your CentOS CD in or whatever, and you go through the installation setup, and that's fine if you only have 1 or 2 servers. But when you have more than that, sometimes you don't want to spend the hours and hours doing it. It seems like Stacki is trying to solve that problem. I'm very interested in their other architecture support. Just glancing through their website, they claim to support the Raspberry Pi as well. So I want to get some questions in about that. Looking forward to learning about it.
Cool. And I also just noticed in the notes that Bill sent me before the show that also happens to be almost exactly 400 episodes ago. So we've been on the air for a long, long time. So this will be a lot of fun actually to sort of catch up on what's happened with the Rocks project and how did it fork to become Stacki. And it looks like there's also some commercial support things and all sorts of wonderful stuff like that. So we'll talk about what part of this is actually free, what part of this you have to pay for, and all sorts of things. But before we do that, I do have an important announcement to make, because This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Cloudflare. Cloudflare is on a mission to help build a better internet. Cloudflare makes your site faster, safer, and more reliable so you can stop worrying about slow loading page times, downtime, or getting hacked. Cloudflare is incredibly easy to use, and sign-up takes less than 5 minutes. Cloudflare's global network of 100-plus data centers caches your content and moves it closer to visitors. Their web optimization features speed up your code and make it mobile responsive. They'll automatically enable all of the latest internet protocols like IPv6 and HTTPS rewrites that keep you fast and secure. Your domain will automatically configure to utilize HTTP2, giving you an over 30% performance boost with no additional configurations. End-to-end, Cloudflare speeds up every request to your site with performant DNS, caching, content optimization, load balancing, and more. Their web application firewall is powered by a massive IP reputation that updates for all users. Cloudflare's 24/7 security team is constantly watching for new zero-day vulnerabilities and deploying firewall rules to block exploit attempts. No matter what you choose for your cloud computing, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, or a combination of public and hybrid, Cloudflare works with all of them. Using Cloudflare gives your business the option to use more than one cloud provider so you don't get locked into any of them. And if you're hit with a DDoS attack or if your site suddenly experiences a surge in legitimate traffic, you pay the same amount because the plans range from free, $20 a month, $200 a month, and custom plans for enterprise. No matter what plan type you sign up for with Cloudflare, you're joining a massive neighborhood watch for the edge of the internet. Cloudflare is offering Twit listeners a free online chat session with one of their top support engineers to answer any of your questions. Visit cloudflare.com/twit to sign up today. That's cloudflare.com/twit. And we thank Cloudflare for their support of Floss Weekly. And now on with the show. So let's go ahead and bring Bill Sanders onto the show here. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I am in beautiful Solana Beach, which is just on the coast in San Diego.
Oh, awesome. And I was I flew out of San Diego Airport yesterday, so I was right there. I should have waved at you from back up here. Cool, yeah. Cool. So give us the 30,000-foot view. What problem is Stacki solving?
So I think you guys, you nailed it in the intro there. The purpose is to be able to rapidly deploy to bare metal servers. Linux distributions. In this case, our main focus is on RHEL and CentOS. But one differentiator with Stacki is that we try to be able to do this at scale so that you can deploy these servers in parallel, not bottlenecking on the front end node, which is basically a management node. And that's sort of the big picture of it. We support, as you mentioned, there's a couple different Linux distros that we have recently enabled support for. Those are in the paid support version, but we also have, in our open source version, support for the ARM on Raspberry Pi. That was a fun project that we just sort of are wrapping up our first outing of.
Cool. And so who would be using this? People obviously that have to have, like at what point does it become interesting? I mean, if I just have 5 machines in the cloud, is this going to help me?
No, I don't. At that scale, it's probably not going to be a big help. Really, once you start getting into the tens, hundreds, thousands of machines, as you mentioned, the roots of the project come from ROX. And ROX was meant to be deployed on high-performance computing. So large clusters in the, I want to say, thousands. The Stacki project sort of diverged a little bit to focus less on high-performance computing and specifically clustered applications to enable all sorts of applications. So OpenStack, Hadoop, Kubernetes. We just released a Kubernetes palette, we call it. It's just an application layer that you can put on top of Stacki and then deploy to your compute nodes. So Kubernetes, Hadoop, Docker, Swarm. So in a cloud context, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You can use Stacki to manage nodes in the cloud. where it really makes the most sense is bare metal, because that's where you're going to get the performance gains of Stacki sort of parallel installer, and the we kind of go for applications that are going to be performance based. So Hadoop, Ceph, again Kubernetes. Those are things that you're going to want to run on bare metal anyway.
And tell me a little bit more about what bare metal means. Does that mean there's no OS running on it at all? And if so, how do you get to talk to it?
Absolutely. So, we talk to nodes that have just been racked. All you have to do is plug in the networking. With these big networked applications I've just been mentioning, step one is usually log into your server and start installing the software. But it sort of leaves out step zero, which is you need an operating system to log into.
Yeah.
You need networking,
Yeah.
you need disks partitioned and what have you. And that's where Stacki comes in. It's that step zero, we like to call it. So the way it works is you set up one server with Stacki on it, and you feed it the MAC addresses of the servers that you'd like to manage. And you tell it, I want this to be Red Hat. You'd be more specific. You could say, I want these 10 servers to run Hadoop. I want these 100 servers to run Kubernetes, however you'd like to set it up. And when you flip on the servers, they do a network request, a DHCP request. They get that. They get the Stacki server management node responds to that, and then they immediately start TFTP booting and installing in parallel. And what's really cool about the way that Stacki does installs is it's not an image-based setup. So you're not copying an entire operating system across the network. The way it works instead is it's based off of Kickstart, which a lot of provisioning tools use. Where Stacki will differ is that once the backend nodes, the compute nodes, start installing packages, they will actually start sharing them with each other over a peer-to-peer kind of BitTorrent style network. And that's so what ends up happening is that the front end node can handle. I mean, I think our latest record was 300 nodes in 14 minutes, and that was at PayPal. We took a bunch of nodes that were running Hadoop, and we set up the Stacki server, brought all those nodes down, started them back up, installed them, configured the disk, configured the controllers, wiped out everything except for the data that was on the HDFS, and within 14 minutes they were back up and running an upgraded version of Hadoop managed by Stacki with their original data.
How do you interface with telling Stacki where you want everything and what disks you want to attach to which things? And is there some configuration language that you're using here?
Yeah, so this is one differentiator from the Rocks project that we added, and that is that Stacki can be managed via spreadsheets, actually. So you can create a yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
We're trying to get away from spreadsheets and actual accounting, and all of a sudden you brought them back.
Yeah, it's actually, it works really well. They're essentially just CSV files, right? With sort of a known format, and you just go down row by row, and you add host name, the IP address that you want it to have, the MAC address that it does have, and a few other attributes, and there's a stack command that we install that you load that spreadsheet, that CSV file. And at that point you can decide, okay, yes, I do want to install a node, install an operating system on these. And you go to flip the backend nodes up and they start installing.
That's pretty awesome. How did you get involved with Stacki?
At my previous job, I did a lot of work with automation. And actually, the same place I met you at Scale, the Southern California Linux Expo, which is kind of it's a really fun convention. So I happened to meet them there. There's actually a couple of my former coworkers. Yeah, there you go. Yep. There's a couple of my former coworkers work here, and they recognized me, and we got to talking. And it's it's pretty cool. We're 95% of the code's written in Python. The exceptions are, the performance critical bits. But yeah.
Cool. Jonathan's got a question, I think.
Oh, sure. So you caught me just a little bit by surprise there, Randall.
Sorry, I'm just rehearsing what we did last week. It's just, the handoffs are running rough for some reason. I don't know what that deal is. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, so you talked about TFTP booting. Does Stacki support PXE as well, the network boot with that style?
Yes, we've found some issues with PXE. Certain hardware doesn't work well with it. It claims it supports it, but it doesn't have very good support for it. TFTP seems to work in almost every case. We had some issues with EFI with that as well, but TFTP works in every case that we've tried so far. So we kind of stick with that. We definitely want to be hardware agnostic. We want to support any vendor. If it's an x86 box or in this case a Raspberry Pi, we want to be able to support that.
So TFTP certainly is something you see in like a Raspberry Pi. I can't say that I've actually ever seen TFTP in something like a server motherboard and server BIOS. I don't think it's supported in any of the desktops I've got here. How common is TFTP, or is there some sort of shim that you have to use to get there?
No, it's certainly all the hardware that I've come across. If you set in the BIOS, if you set the machine to boot from the network, it'll do a TFTP boot eventually. It's the DHCP server answers that, and it hands it off to the TFTP server, which happens to be on the same machine in our case.
Okay, so it's kind of a function of the DHCP that's built into it as opposed to PXE. That makes sense. So you've talked a little bit about the Raspberry Pi. Is this just the Pi 3 that you support?
The Pi 3 is the only one that we've tested on, but it should work on the Pi 2. The hardware on the Pi 3 is just a little bit better, so that's why we reached out for that one. The performance of these things is not, it's nothing to get terribly excited about, but it does open up some cool possibilities because, it was a way for us to sort of, let me back up a little bit. So we're releasing Stacki 4 very soon. And part of the design effort with Stacki 4 was to try to open up our architecture support a little bit, both in terms of hardware as well as in terms of operating systems, Linux distros. And so the Raspberry Pi project was a really cool way for us to do that. We'd like to be able to have Stacki manage IoT devices. So, for example, if you've got some more esoteric devices, like let's say you're manufacturing something that has an onboard embedded ARM processor. Obviously, at this point, we're not talking very, very thin embedded devices, but something with a gig of RAM or so. Once you've got, say, 1,000 of those things, which is not unreasonable if you're talking about these very small devices, it becomes a big pain to manage, and existing tooling doesn't really fit that very well. And so that's kind of where we saw an opening for Stacki, is to say, well, if you've got 500,000 disk drives with ARM processors on it, and you want to run something on all of those, or install something on those, Stacki is good at the parallel part. Stacki is good at the scale. So let's see if we can get it to handle the architecture. And we're pretty excited about that, actually. It also makes for great, demoware, right? So you can take that on the road pretty easy and just say, hey, look, this is, this can manage 1,000 x86 boxes.
So something that I've ran into a few times, and you can tell me how crazy this is, something like wireless access points. So I manage one property where we've got like 10 wireless access points. There was one time when we had to update all of them, and I had to carry my laptop around and climb up on the ladder and plug the Ethernet cable into the laptop for each access point to go to the newest version of OpenWRT. Is that something that doesn't sound like you support it now, but is that something that could be possible with work with Stacki?
As in deploying a new software stack to random devices?
Sure. So OpenWRT is probably the thinnest. It's kind of been forked into lead now. It's kind of the thinnest Linux distro that exists, as far as I know, and it's designed to run on devices with flash sizes as small as 4 megs. I'm just curious whether Stacki is something that's flexible enough that, with a reasonable amount of work, it could be adapted to do an install like that.
We've definitely not worked on anything that lean, but that said, I can't think of any specific reason why that should not work. As you said, there'd have to be some work put into Stacki to make that happen. But this is the kind of tool that can do that kind of stuff.
That would certainly have an advantage over standing at the top of a ladder trying to balance the Ethernet cable and the laptop to get stuff installed.
That sounds a bit precarious.
Yeah, it was a fun day. So we do have a chat room, and we have people actively asking questions, and I will get into trouble, and Randall will get into trouble if we do not get some of these questions asked. The first one is, can we get free tickets to Stacki Fest 2017?
Yeah, actually, I was going to bring up Stacki Fest later. So we have a conference. It's an annual conference. It's in San Francisco, and it happens to be this Thursday. We managed to get into the slot right before Stacki Fest for FLOSS Weekly. And so, I can give you a promo code right now. The promo code is FLOSS, all uppercase. And if you go to stackiq.com/StackiFest, you can get to the link to get to where you put in that promo code. So please come to Stacki Fest. I will be giving a talk there on NetApp controllers or NetApp arrays. Sorry, but there's going to be lots of other goodness. There's something for everybody. If you're very new to Stacki, there will be talks about kind of getting started, as well as talks about where we're kind of planning on going in the future.
All right, very cool. Another one of the questions we have is, and someone was remarking that it seems that FLOSS Weekly has been covering the same sort of project for several months now. So the question specifically was this: what are some of the projects that are similar, and how do you differ?
Okay. We get asked this question a lot, and it's a little bit complicated. So we are in a similar space to, say, Foreman. Oh shoot, what's the other one? It starts with a C. Oh dang. I believe Ubuntu has, Canonical has a project called Maz. That's in a similar space. So it's just Stacki just handles deploying the operating system with configuration on bare metal servers. For a while we had like an Amazon EC2 component too. We took that out. The sort of underlying API kept changing, and things like doing DHCP, TFTP boots in the cloud were problematic in some cases. But it's certainly something that we could add back in if there was enough demand. But we really see right now kind of a shift away from the public cloud and toward internal clouds, at least for large deployments. I'm trying to think of that other tool.
That's all right. It wasn't very fair of me to give you a pop quiz on your competitors. That was kind of mean, wasn't it?
I can tell you that they do exist, and the key differentiator is going to be scale. So you can deploy a few nodes at a time, maybe a couple dozen nodes at a time on something like Foreman, but Stacki, you can deploy hundreds of nodes at a time.
Randall Schwartz just whispered in my ear that Cobbler was the one you were trying to think of.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Randall.
They work in a similar way in that, they're all sort of based off of this idea of, some sort of kickstart language with DHCP boot. But where we really differentiate is not bottlenecking on the management node.
All right, so Sonic Spin, for the moment, our last question from the chat room. Sonic Spin wants to know, would this be good for CI? I believe he means continuous integration servers.
That's interesting. I've actually thought about that a lot. I've set something up internally for nightly builds of Stacki, and it certainly could, because this is my personal take on it, is that you could easily, with a couple scripts or maybe something that listens for events, plug into Stacki and say, hey, I need a dozen VMs right now to run this test, or a test suite against my application or something like that. It would be a little bit of kind of DIY right now, but I think it's a really compelling use case, actually.
Okay. And then you talked about when doing fresh installs using a BitTorrent style approach, whereas things get installed, they then also get hosted by the boxes that have received them, so that you're not bottlenecking against your one machine that is hosting everything. Does that work, and does Stacki work for doing updates? So if I didn't want to wipe a machine back to bare metal, just install a set of updates, RPM packages, say, does Stacki support that, and do you have that same BitTorrent style shared hosting?
That's another common request that we've had, and that won't be in Stacki 4, but it's definitely on our roadmap to get that sort of baked in by default. As it stands right now, there's an alternative way in that you can tell Stacki to not wipe out certain partitions, and so in that way you can add the updates to Stacki, and then specify the servers that you'd like to update, and it's like a hard upgrade, but it'll take the servers down, just like that PayPal Hadoop demo that I mentioned earlier, where we leave the data on the disks. We only wipe out slash and /var by default. So you could get an upgraded system that way with some downtime, but in the future, we're definitely going to add support for doing that peer-to-peer installs of just arbitrary yum packages at runtime.
This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by GoCD. GoCD is an on-premise, open-source continuous delivery server created by ThoughtWorks. With GoCD's comprehensive pipeline modeling, you can model complex workflows across multiple teams with ease. GoCD can easily configure dependencies for fast feedback and on-demand deployment with its parallel and sequential execution. It offers complete customization for your software's individual needs. GoCD's real power is in the visibility it provides over your end-to-end workflow, so you get complete control of and visibility into all your deployments across the organization. It supports auditable deployment and can delegate configuration of pipelines to users without full-blown admin privileges. GoCD will perform tests written in most languages or frameworks. Their test reporting will tell you exactly which change set and on which platform a test started breaking. You can compare content across any two arbitrary builds, making it invaluable when troubleshooting a broken pipeline. Numerous plugins are available, or you can write your own. Say goodbye to deployment panic and hello to consistent, predictable deliveries. GoCD is an open source that you can download and use for free. Discover the power of their pipelines at gocd.io/twit. That's gocd.io/twit. Commercial support and enterprise add-ons, including disaster recovery, are also available. And we thank GoCD for their support of Floss Weekly. And so one of the questions I had as I'm listening to this is this a replacement then for something like Puppet or Chef or the traditional configuration things? Can I do it all just by plugging it into Stacki?
That's actually a good question. The short answer is that it can replace a lot of that. The the longer answer is so Stacki has its own sort of templating language built in. And when I mentioned those application add-ons that we have, like the Hortonworks Hadoop, the Kubernetes, the Docker, that is what we've written in that our own templating language. But if you already have your own, sort of DevOps configuration management tool that you're comfortable with, certainly we've got plenty of people that will use Stacki to lay down the operating system, and then as a last step in that templating language, it'll say, great, now install Puppet or Ansible or what have you, and then go here to grab your manifests or your playbooks and start running them, right? So that the very first time that server boots, it has already got its configuration laid out, either because you did it in our configuration language or you did it in Ansible or Puppet or something. So you can keep your existing playbooks as well, which is kind of nice for a lot of people.
So I'm guessing that since this is all in Python, anyway, is it that you're using Jinja for that?
No, actually, it's
your own.
Yeah, it's interesting because we wanted to remain agnostic, and so what we did is we actually, and people cringe when I say this, but it works really well. We have it's an XML based template.
It's getting worse.
I promise it's not that bad. It's we've got
spreadsheets to drive configuration, XML for templating, in Python behind the scenes. Okay, I'm gonna need some time to recover after this show. And you knew Perl. You said in your message you knew Perl. You learned from my book, and then you go off into the Python world, and this is what happens. Sorry,
I know.
I should stop ranking on Python. People yell at me when I do that. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead and explain your XML templates.
I have love in my heart for Python and Perl. It's a fond language in my heart.
You're probably a Vim user too, right?
Huh?
You're probably a Vim user too, right?
I am absolutely a Vim user.
Okay. Well, we don't need those questions at the end of the show.
I will stop interrupting you. Tell us about the XML templates. I will shut up now.
So essentially, all it is it lets you put an existing shell script or Python script, if you like, in a tag, right? And you can literally just paste it, right? So we could support other interpreters. No one's asked for Perl yet, but shell and Python scripts. You paste it right in there, and it just sort of works. You can do more complex things with it, and that's kind of what we end up needing to do for supporting like Kubernetes and Hadoop. But just because they're more complicated than a single shell script usually can capture. So it's certainly there. You don't have to use it. We use it internally in Stacki. Aside from just the application layer stuff, Stacki itself. If you want to lay down a specific set of partitions, there's a spreadsheet for that. Stacki will use that template language. There's some scripts built into that to figure out, okay, what disks are available to me. If you specify variables in your spreadsheet, we can expand the size of a disk to grow to fill a partition, to grow a partition to fill a disk, to split it up evenly, what have you. So it lets us be flexible, essentially.
I was actually going to ask about that. I'm curious. So you have, I install 10 machines in a rack, and is there a way for me to say that everything in this rack is going to be the same kind of machine and needs to be sort of clustered together without having to go in and specify each individual MAC address and stuff? Or how does this, is there something like Discovery? Can it actually figure out that there are new machines?
Absolutely. We do have a Discovery tool, and basically you flip that on and it starts a DHCP server. So whether or not you can use that in your environment depends on your environment. If you're going to have clients listening or sending out DHCP requests, and you don't want your MacBook to be be getting an IP in Stacki. But basically, you turn on Discovery Tool, and then you do DHCP requests either by hand or rebooting the machines that you want. And Stacki will grab those, and when you say go, it'll start installing them. And yeah, you can specify, I want this rack to be one particular appliance, and to get this package set, essentially, this configuration layout on disk, that sort of thing.
And by the way, what I was scanning through looking for other bare metal provisioners, I also found the names of Razor and Morpheus and Ironic. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah. So Ironic is part of the OpenStack project, and Razor, I believe, is Puppet. Is a Puppet tool, and I think those are much newer projects. So, as I mentioned before, Stacki is a fork of Rocks. Rocks goes back 17 years, right? It's almost eligible to vote. And so Stacki, the fork itself, diverged probably, I want to say maybe 6 years ago. And so we've got a lot of experience solving these problems. And like I said before, I'm pretty sure, unless something has changed very recently, that Stacki is the only one that doesn't have that bottlenecking issue.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about StackIQ for a second. So that's the company that you work for, right? And you have some other coworkers there, and you're providing commercially hardened versions of Stacki, or is it the same Stacki I can get as open source?
There's a few small differences. The basic idea is to sell support. If you're a large enterprise and you want help, say, creating a new application palette that's specific to what you need, like a MapR or a Cloudera or something like that, that's the kind of support that you could pay us for. We'll help you do that. Also, if you just, if you run into any trouble during the setup or ongoing maintenance, that's the kind of thing you can get paid support for. There's a few other pieces that are close paid support right now. So the SLES server, 12 and 11.3, we support that in the closed source edition, as well as Ubuntu, I believe CoreOS. Those are all paid support versions that we'd like eventually. We do believe in the open source thing here, so we would eventually like to open those up. But they're fairly new developments, so they're just not there yet. I'm trying to think of other examples of paid support types of products. That covers it. So we have a paid support palette again, like our sort of unit of Stacki, and in that it comes with Salt, and it comes with there's a REST API so that you can manage these nodes via HTTP requests. You can build your own application on top of Stacki to manage nodes.
Cool. And so, how's your community? How much of the current edition of Stacki was built by you guys at StackIQ versus contributed by users? Yeah,
I would say that our code contributing community is small at the moment. Stacki as an open source project, as I mentioned before, it was forked from Rocks, which was open source. It was closed source for a couple of years because it's under a BSD style license. But then about, I want to say 2 years ago, we opened the code back up and tried to double down on the open source stuff. Like we used to have a proprietary version of these, the Hadoop palette, OpenStack palette, and we've opened those up so that we're trying to build that community. We don't have a lot of third-party community at large code contributions yet. I think it's also a function of the nature of the project. It's a large project that touches a lot of different pieces of the stack, and I think is going to be widely deployed by sysadmins as opposed to developers. That might just be my perception, but I would guess that it's never going to be a project that would attract as many people until it reaches some sort of critical mass, perhaps.
It's sometimes frustrating when you're working on a project where the people who can actually make it better are not necessarily people who are mostly using it. So, but it's good that at least you are getting some feedback out there. Do you have I know like Ansible has like a repository for common configurations so you can share what you discover. Of course, like Perl has a CPAN and everything else has got like some sort of common repository. The same thing exists for Stacki?
That's on our roadmap. We definitely want to get that out very soon. So again, that's part of the reason why we did the open sourcing of some of those palettes. But we're trying to build up that community right now. Eventually, we'd like to have, and those are all on GitHub, by the way. You can find them via our website also, but they're all on GitHub. But yeah, it would be awesome to have that front end to see what you can do with Stacki. Another thing that we're looking at doing is we have a lot of internal spreadsheets that we use for testing for complex networking situations or complex partitioning. And we'd like to get those out of our test suite and into the code base so that if you want to say, well, gee, how do I set up, a bonded, bridged VLAN, blah, 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 you can look at some sort of sample to get an idea of how you would apply that to your own network.
And what else is on the roadmap since you brought that up?
Oh, good question. So, one thing that I would like to see, this isn't specifically our roadmap, but one thing I would like to see is sort of broadening support for our operating systems. So it would be great if we could do Fedora. And that's more possible now with Stacki 4. It would be awesome if we could get in someone from the community to kind of help with that porting effort. And obviously we'd sort of, guide them through that process. But I'd like to see that. In addition to that, we'd like to port to Python 3. And what else have we got coming up? It's hard because we're just wrapping up Stacki 4 any day now. So we've all been heads down on that. I've certainly got a lot of internal tools that I want to build and open source. Things like that continuous integration, continuous deployment tool. What else? Yeah, the IoT stuff is going to continue to be interesting for us, I think, as well as perhaps adding another couple of application palettes. I've got a lot of experience with Ceph, so I'd love to add that if I can, squeeze the time in. Yeah.
So one of the things that I find very interesting with commercial support and open source when they come together is oftentimes customers come with strange or unusual requests or just off-the-wall things they want to do. And a lot of times we get some really interesting stories, kind of like my story of dangling off the side of a ladder to flash open right on the routers. So do you have any crazy stories? What's the weirdest or hardest thing that you guys have pulled off?
I think if you go back to the Rocks days, there was the installation, and I should clarify, most of the developers here at StackIQ are the former Rocks developers. I think only a couple stayed with the Rocks project, but they at a supercomputer conference they did a demo where in 2 hours they unboxed, racked, networked, and installed the 128 node cluster in just under 2 hours. So that was kind of a fun demo they did. More recently, there's just been some really, really goofy instances. Anytime you're working with in people's data centers, for example, it's always just a little bit weird. Like there was one customer we were with, and there was they were having a DDoS attack while we were at the data center setting stuff up, and so it was like this kind of tense moment. Like, oh, what did you guys do? Didn't end up being us. We were on a completely isolated segment of the network, but yeah.
All right, and what is the biggest cluster that you guys have managed and installed? How big have you scaled?
So the ROX pedigree goes back, and it's managed clusters. I think the record is 3,500 nodes. The Stacki it's interesting because of the nature of the project. We're not going to get as much of the feedback as the ROX project did because it's based more in academia. Our users are more likely to be a little tight-lipped. I think the current record that we've got is 700 for a particular customer, and that was not that wasn't all rolled out at the same time. Unfortunately, that was sort of they did a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there. That's the biggest one that we know of.
What background do you have to manage a Stacki installation?
It's surprisingly easy. If you can manage a spreadsheet and a little bit of command line, you can easily deploy something like Kubernetes, right? Because all the heavy lifting is done in the software layer that we've put in. So you need to be a little bit familiar with a Unix command line, and you don't even have to edit the CSV files. We can import from Excel if you can upload the file to wherever it is you need it to be. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty easy to use tool. There's an interactive prompt, so you can sort of explore the different options. Yeah.
And what kind of code contributions would you like? What are you missing the most? The type of person, or maybe internationalization or something?
Internationalization would be pretty cool. That's because it's not something that's currently on our roadmap. Like I mentioned before, it would be awesome to see people contributing, different pieces of the application layer. So I mentioned Ceph earlier, but likewise the actual Linux distribution support would be great to expand too. So adding stuff like Fedora, adding stuff OpenSUSE. It's just we don't get a lot of enterprise customers looking for that. So we have to juggle making developments to improve Stacki itself for everybody versus adding, you might call it a pet project. But yeah, certainly there's low-hanging fruit there. We've got the Python 3 port kind of on the roadmap, and I think most people that are familiar with Python could probably help manage that. And there's some other low-hanging stuff like documentation bugs. We do have a issue tracker on GitHub, and certainly if you find a bug, open it there, and we can help triage it, maybe fix that. Yeah.
And what's the attendance of something like StackiConf?
So last year was the first one. It was fairly small. It was also the only, I want to say, less than a year after we'd open sourced the project. It was less than 100, I want to say. I actually wasn't at that one for whatever reason. But yeah, we're expecting a better turnout this year. We're at the Clift Hotel in San Francisco, and it should be a lot of fun. There's, like I said before, there's going to be talks for everybody there.
Hey, something just came to mind that I feel like I have to ask. So Stacki is for deploying servers to bare metal. How does one deploy Stacki? How do you bootstrap it and get the first one installed? Is it just an ISO or a package? How does that work? And can Stacki install Stacki? Is it turtles all the way down?
I love that you asked that question. So I put in the features to make it so that Stacki can install Stacki. I did that in the last 6 months. I was pretty proud of that. Yeah. So once you have a Stacki set up, you can deploy other Stacki front ends with that. If you, for whatever you need to segment your management nodes a little bit more. Aside from that, so Stacki itself is shipped either as something that you can install on top of a standard RHEL or CentOS install, or we also took the CentOS installer and we sort of crammed the Stacki stuff in there. So you just have to go through our install wizard, which is, like 8 questions. What's the IP address of this thing supposed to be? What its host name, password? Nothing at all complex. It's if you've done any Linux install in the last 5 years, this is not going to be anything new to you.
If I had a distributed setup, like say I was in a couple of locations for EC2 or something, and I was using this to help roll that out or whatever, would I need to have a separate instance of Stacki in each of the geographical regions that or maybe my bare metal would sit in if I bought some rack spaces, and not to mention names, bought some space in a rack at various places? Would I need to deploy Stacki so that it could see the DHCP traffic and stuff? Would I need one of those in each of the locations then?
That would be the ideal setup. Yeah. You can get around that with things like a DHCP relay, but certainly when you start talking about deploying nodes, it's going to perform best if you have one on each sort of discrete network.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what I thought it would have to be. So there we go. I'm almost guessing right.
Yeah.
And we're almost. Sometimes I have intuition that almost works. We're almost out of time. Is there anything that we haven't asked yet that you want to make sure our audience is aware of?
Oh gosh, I think we covered the big stuff. We're certainly interested, whether or not you come to Stacki Fest on Thursday, to hear from people that have sort of interesting management problems, either at large scale or in particular right now with the non-x86 architecture. That's definitely something that we'd be interested in helping people explore. It seems like a kind of a cool area to work in. And that's part of how we decide to take on certain projects. Well, that sounds pretty cool. We should mess with that. So we've got like 10 Raspberry Pis over here on one of those funny little racks. Let's see. Other than that, no. Look out for Stacki 4. It's right around the corner. And we have a Slack channel if you want to ask any questions in there, and you can find all that stuff on our website. I believe stackiq.com is the current website.
Awesome. And I hope you didn't take too much offense at me sort of ribbing you for XML and Excel and things like that. I mean it in the greatest respect, but it seems odd that some of these technology choices were made, and I have to have humor in that. And the only way I can react to that is to be humorous about it. So I hope you didn't take too much offense at that.
No, you're not the first person to jab the ribcage on that one. But I would just say that the implementation is a lot better than you think it is. It's certainly not that whole XML. The best solution to XML is to add more XML. It's not like that.
Okay. Yeah. No. I've worked on many actual practical XML applications, and I've played with a lot of spreadsheets, so I can't really discount any of this stuff. So, but that's great. Hey, it's been great chatting with you, Bill. I appreciate you coming on talking about Stacki. Again, I'm sure you're going to get a bump in people understanding about this and wanting to play with it further. So, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. There's Bill Sanders, who is one of the guys at StackIQ, talking about Stacki. What did you think there, Jonathan?
So very interesting. I love the fact that they're moving towards supporting ARM with the Raspberry Pi and those things. It's always fun to see projects watching in that direction and starting to move in that direction. With the idea that at some point we'll have more than just x86 devices running in our racks. I do have a fear that if Stacki can host Stacki, that this will be how Skynet comes to be. But other than that, it sounds like a great project.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat room too. That's pretty good. Anyway, so I don't really have much further to add to that, but yeah, this is great. The bare metal provisioning is becoming almost as important. Well, a similarly important issue to things like cloud provisioning. So, the thing about clouds is they typically come already with some bare metal or not some bare metal, some low-level operating system already installed by the time that they're powered on. So, at least as far as we can see, I don't know how they do the bare metal provisioning at, say, AWS. I mean, one of them do that. Must be EC2 must do it somehow. Anyway, we don't know. We don't care. Maybe we'll talk to them someday and talk about that. But before that, we will be talking to a bunch of other possible guests. Not possible. They're booked guests. I should say that because they're on the schedule. Coming up next week, we have FreeNAS, which is network attached storage based on FreeBSD and ZFS. I'll actually be at the Red Hat Summit over in Boston while that's happening. So I got to find a room that's got good Wi-Fi or good hardwire, possibly just using my modem like I am this week, my Sprint modem that seems to work everywhere and is unlimited bandwidth or unlimited, megabytes a month, gigabytes a month. There we go. Following that, though, I will be at OSCON, and we already booked our guest for that. It's the Open Hub, which is how you discover, track, and compare open source. And they're going to have some big announcement at OSCON, and we get to be the scoop for it. We actually will be on this show even before they announce it at the conference. So, hey, that's going to be pretty cool. So we can just watch my show, and they don't have to go to the announcement there, I guess. Anyway, Kubernetes update. We had them on in August 2015. That, of course, is orchestration for Docker. We actually mentioned that a couple times in today's show. Just added to the schedule, Faraday RF, which is digital radio networking using the 33 centimeter band, which should be really, really cool. Jonathan, I think you invited them to be on the show?
Yes, I've been bugging these guys for months to come tell us about it, and so I'm looking forward to that one. Maybe I can be a co-host that day as well.
Okay, well, yeah. As long as you're not every week, I don't mind if you're every week. I just now watch me put my foot further in my mouth than I did about 20 minutes ago. Anyway, also on the schedule still. Let me finish. On the schedule, we got NPM, the Node.js package manager. That'll be fun. Etsy Divertsy, which is to collect information about waste streams so that you can help your business go green, from the people, of course, that brought us Etsy. It's some of their behind-the-scenes software, but they've open sourced it and even make their servers available for you to use directly without having to do any kind of install. Very cool. Just added to the schedule as well, Magento. This is an e-commerce platform. Think of it as shopping carts on steroids. Remember the old shopping carts back from the late 90s? Well, this thing is the entire solution. They claim that they're the number one e-commerce platform, maybe the number one e-commerce open source platform. I don't know, but we'll have them on the show, and they can explain what they mean like that to us. Also just added to the schedule, Cockpit, which allows you to administer your Linux system via the web. It's supposed to be like somewhat similar, at least in concept, to Webmin, if you're familiar with that. But this is a whole new project. Should be pretty fun. You can see all those and all other upcoming guests that we're working on at twit.tv/floss, the homepage for this show. There's a link from there to what I call the big spreadsheet, which actually is a spreadsheet. Yes, I manage this show with a spreadsheet.
The irony is strong with this one.
The irony is strong. I know. It's a Google spreadsheet, though. It's kind of cool. All right. We do have one slot left in Q2. I'm opening up Q3. We have a live stream at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time when we tape this show, and it has been mostly Tuesdays live at twit.tv. We took about 3 or 4 questions from the chat room today. However, I have an announcement. We are moving to Wednesdays beginning June 28th. So if you've been so used to having this on your calendar every week, wake up in time to watch the show, you'll have to change that on June 28th. We'll be moving permanently to Wednesdays, just like we had last week, actually. You can follow us at Floss Weekly on Google+, and also at Floss Weekly on Twitter. Follow me at Randall L. Schwartz on Google+, and Merlin at Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N, on Twitter. I will be at Red Hat Summit, as I just mentioned. That's in Boston. Next week, I'll be looking forward to meeting some of my longtime Boston friends that I haven't seen in a while. I have a couple days, actually, I'm kicking back. Cinco de Mayo happens to be one of those days. So I am going to be looking for the most fun Boston Irish bar. I wonder what that could be. I'm sure they have at least 1 or 2 of them there. So I'm going to be looking for that. That ought to... Wait. Why am I saying Irish? Mexican bar. They let anybody do this show. Let me finish. I'm close to the end. I'm close. I'm also going to be at OSCON 2 weeks after that, 2 weeks after this, in Austin, which is going to be very, very hot, probably 95 degrees every day. But luckily, I'm staying right across the street at a real nice Airbnb. I'm going to be at YAPSI, which is going to be, actually, it's now called the Pro Conference. I need to fix that. It's going to be in D.C., and that's coming up in about 2 months, I think it is. So I'll be D.C. during the middle of some sort of hot summertime. Just got added to my schedule, the conference called allthingsopen.org. I think it's done in like October or something like that. And it's going to be a nice 2 or 3 day open source conference. And they've invited me to be able to go talk to their attendees and the presenters to see if we get some more guests for FLOSS Weekly. And then, of course, DragonCon is my usual indulgence conference. I'm speaking on Dart, actually. I'll be giving a 1-hour talk on why Dart should be your next programming language. That'll be a lot of fun. That sounds familiar. I did that title for Smalltalk about 7 years ago. I guess I'm going through every language. Why this should be your next programming language. When you see me doing one on why Python should be your next programming language, you know I've gone insane. Okay, that's going to be the end of that. Is there anything you want to plug before I just completely hang up here? Because I think we're almost done.
So if Faraday RF is not till May 30th, that's a month away, you have 4 shows to get other people in other than me before the one I requested.
Okay. Well, I already have Simon for next week, so I know that. And Simon will be back. He's going to be co-hosting the FreeNAS show, which would be nice and cool. And I think I'm doing the Open Hub show entirely on my own. So it's because we're doing it live and like physically live, not just live like we're doing it here. I'm going to be right there at OSCON chatting across the table with the people from the Open Hub project. So that'll be fun. All right. Before I, Jonathan, thank you once again for jumping in and being the co-host for the show. I always appreciate you with your insight and questions, and we'll be, and so thank you.
It was great to be here. It was a lot of fun today.
This is what happens when I only get 5 hours of sleep because I didn't get in until 11:30 last night. I think that's part of it. Oh, man, I got to learn to sleep more. Well, when it moves to Wednesday, it's going to be a little bit easier for me because I usually travel on Mondays, and that makes it a long day. However, we will see you again next week on FLOSS Weekly.